Tuples are nearly identical to lists, except that they are immutable. They cannot be changed. Tuples are created using parentheses rather than square brackets. So here's an example of an empty tuple. A equals open and close parentheses. Here's a tuple that I've assigned to the variable color, which has 3 elements, which I am using to represent an RGB color. Here's another tuple that I'm calling my name, which will have my first, middle initial, and last name. So how do I insert data into a tuple? Can I do an append? So I take my name, I want to append my degree to it. I get a name error. Oh, that's a boring error because I didn't evaluate that cell first. I come down here, instead of a name error, I get an attribute error. Tuple object has no attribute append. Okay, why? Tuples are immutable. Once I've defined my name, I cannot change it. Okay, I access data the same way that I do with a list or with a string, with square bracket indexing. So here, the 0th element in my name is Brian. Okay, how do I modify a tuple? You don't. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to create a tuple. In this case, my tuple is going to have numbers, strings, and a list. So if I access the last element of the tuple and I try to append it, can I do this? Well, I should have cleared my cell because you see the answer already, and the answer is yes. The tuple that is in the list that is in the tuple is mutable. So I can change that element in the tuple, but I cannot remove that element from the tuple or add anything else to the tuple. Okay, there's a useful object in Python called name tuples, and here I have a link to the documentation for it. And this is from the collections library. So if I import collections, then I can create a named tuple. And this is convenient in terms of if I have a structure that I'm going to be using a lot, and I don't want to have to remember, okay, is the 4th element, is that the date of birth, or is that the date of enrollment, etc. That instead of having an indexing, I associate a name with every position in the tuple, and then I can access the attribute through the name. So in this case, these are things that I use in a simple text processing package I've written. And so this T item stands for tag item, and it has elements of a context item, a span, a scope, a found phrase, a context category, and ID. Now the context item itself is another name tuple, and it contains a literal, a category, a regular expression, and a rule. In this case, I'm going to use a name tuple to create a patient name. And a patient name consists of a first name, a last name, a middle name, and a suffix. Okay, so let me define these. And so then I am going to create a patient name, and so we'll explore some of the different ways you can do this. So in this case, I'm providing a string for each element in the name tuple. You notice here that I haven't anywhere said what type of variables these are. It's just that they are named. So in this case, I've created a patient name, and when I print it out, it tells me that this is a patient name, and its values are, first is Brian, last is Chapman, middle is E, and suffix is PhD. I can still access these elements by index, or I can access them by the name, and this is the syntax for doing that. Okay, in this case, I'm doing a patient name, but instead of providing strings, in this case I have an integer, a tuple, a string, and a list. This Python char is perfectly It is perfectly valid, and I can insert in here a print your name. So Python, it doesn't care what these elements are in the named index. It's just providing a way for you to access it in a potentially more convenient manner. Okay, because these are named elements, I can switch around the order that I add them. In this case, I'm doing last, first, next, suffix, then middle. It doesn't care. I can even mix up what would be considered positional arguments. So in this case, I'm not saying whether it's a first or last, but Python will infer that this is the first, this is the last name, and then I'm providing suffix in middle. So great flexibility in these named tuples. Okay, so just to summarize, tuples are nearly identical to lists, with the exception being that they are immutable.